you ever wondered if those expensive designer supplements you're taking are doing little more than resulting in expensive pee? In this episode, you'll learn everything you need to know about supplements, yet no one's told you, such as the retailer you should never buy your supplements from, some of the common pitfalls in deceptive tactics used in the supplement industry, and how to avoid those, the basics of running self-experiments, which ingredients you should choose for particular outcomes and purposes, and a whole lot more. Welcome to Mind Body Peak Performance. I'm your host, Nick Urban, and you are tuning in to episode number 116. Today, we're joined by my friend, Shawn Wells. Shawn was recently on the podcast back on episode number 95 with Daniel Solomon of Drink Update. Shawn was the mastermind behind the main active ingredient in the Update energy drink that's widely considered to be similar but superior to caffeine. Shawn Wells is the world's leading biochemist and an expert on health optimization. He has formulated well over 1,000 supplements, foods, beverages, and patented 25 novel ingredients, including paraxanthine, teacrine, dynamine, dihydroberberine, and is now known as the ingredientologist, aka the science of ingredients. Formerly a chief clinical dietitian with over a decade of clinical experience, he has counseled thousands of people on innovative health solutions such as keto, paleo, fasting, and supplements. As you'll learn in the show, he has also personally overcome various health issues, including Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depression, insomnia. As a world-renowned thought leader on mitochondrial health, he has been paid to speak on 5 different continents. He's also regularly featured on morning television. As you'll hear, his expertise can help any health-conscious individual to better manage stress and experience greater resiliency and more energy through using his practical, research-backed solutions. His book, The Energy Formula, has been recognized by both USA Today and Forbes, as well as an Amazon bestseller in multiple categories. The resources and everything we discuss will be in the show notes, which you can find at mindbodypeak.com/ and then the number 116. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did recording it. And with that out of the way, sit back, relax, and enjoy this supplement deep dive with Shawn Wells. Shawn Wells, welcome back to Mind Body Peak Performance.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be on a second time, solo this time.
Yeah, and although you're solo this time, we recorded an episode with Daniel of Drink Update, and I actually had my paraxanthine this morning. So that's one habit that's stuck with me ever since we recorded last, and I'm still enjoying it. But I'm curious, what are the unusuals or non-negotiables you've personally done for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony today?
Oh, wow. Just coming right out of the gate. You know what? I try and keep an excellent sleep hygiene routine, but I'm also, this is kind of like bigger picture, right? Like where I try and plan, but I also allow for kindness and ease to myself. I plan everywhere I can. I can be that uh, left-brained person for like logic and like planning and goal setting. But I also have the creative flexibility, flow, intuitiveness, empathy, and care for myself to say, this is what my body needs right now. Like, I hear you. I have the conversation, the dialogue with myself. Like, we can set it up to have excellent goals and routines, but I can also be in flow and say, this is what I need right now. And I would encourage, like, I believe in biohacking. I used to be so rigid that, I'd be taking all the supplements and I'd be doing NAD IVs, and I'd be like, if I could stack like 18 things at once, I would. And it's like whatever the dose is, it reminds me of like the Chris Rock like routine where he's on stage. He's like, tell me the dose that would kill me and then back it off a little bit. It's like, that's like where I was, it's like, And then I started finding like this more feminine energy of like biohacking was extreme masculine, like the most masculine energy. And like now there's like the grounding and the breath work and the meditation and prayer and gratitude and sun gazing and forest bathing and all of these things are coming in that I think like thank God. Like we need like some self-care. We need connection with nature. We need connection with each other. These things are absolutely critical to our health and well-being. I have a high fat, high protein meal first thing in the morning. That's been shown with data to be ideal because if you do have carbohydrates, it's good to have carbohydrates when you are in motion, when you are non sedentary. If you've just been sedentary of sleeping through the night, it's not ideal to have carbohydrates, especially high glycemic carbohydrates. But I think you should keep your carbs low first thing in the morning. You're already semi ketotic, so you can kind of extend that. You know, some people do like the bulletproof coffee kind of concept or upgraded coffee or whatever you want to call it. But then you now it's like we're thinking of carb backloading according to the science, where it's like, okay, you were active all day, so now get your carbohydrates. Guess what? Those carbs help do increase serotonin. Guess what? That helps increase melatonin. And so you actually sleep better if you carb backload. So that's ideal. And I try and keep my carbs more complex unless I'm highly active. So now carbs are part of the equation for movement. I equate because carbs aren't necessary. So I only equate carbs with me moving my body. And the greater degree of movement, the more flexibility or ideal it is to have higher glycemic carbohydrates. So if I'm like, I play competitive doubles, meaning twos volleyball in the sand in Dallas, it is very hot out on the sand. It is very exhaustive work.
Sweet. And I had no idea that you also are a fan of carbohydrate backloading. I've been doing that for what, probably 8 or so years on and off. And I find that it's the style of eating that makes me feel the best. And especially when I'm active, it's a nice combination of like staying fairly low carb during the daytime and getting some of that endogenous fat burning going. And then also like keeping blood sugar very stable. And then around the actual workout, then I introduce carbs and I recover faster. My thyroid improves, all kinds of benefits from that. And it's a nice, it doesn't feel nearly as limiting as like going strict carnivore, strict keto, strict any of the diets.
That's awesome. And by the way, like there's some really interesting data. Like if you're doing kind of like, let's say, a lighter work, like you're not doing quite as a depletive amount of exercise as like me playing doubles in the sand and in the heat. And like you're just doing like, let's say, a 45-minute workout. You want kind of the psychological benefit and lift of some simple carbohydrate, but not consume them. There's some really interesting data around what's called carb swishing. So you actually like take the Gatorade and swish it around. And because your body, like you're tasting it sublingually, there's like some shortcuts that happen that make you think you have the carbohydrates, but you can spit it out and you not actually consume these sugars. And they've shown that there's similar benefits. And if you do want the carbs, like during like an hour workout, it's not that much that you actually consume during a workout that makes a difference. It's only around like 17 or 20 grams. It's pretty low. So like the net effect of that, you're talking about like 70 to 80 calories. Like that's not a lot. So like if you're going to have like some sugars, you know, you could add that to a pre-workout if you want. That would be like a tablespoon or so of like, you know, some carbohydrate powder if that's what you wanted to do. And, you know, you're going to burn through that during the workout.
Yeah, the mouth rinses are very interesting. I mean, carbohydrate mouth rinses are the traditional ones they've been used for like endurance athletes, especially. But then I've seen more research recently around like coffee mouth washes and mouth rinses and things like that. I'm like, I wonder where this whole field is going to go.
It's super interesting. Like along with this, the whole idea of like microdosing carried into everything. There's like, Ben Greenfield is exploring doing like alcohol microdosing and, all these different things where it's like, okay, like we've talked about minimum effective dose. Uh, we've talked about homeopathics. I've actually worked on this concept and trademarked this idea called echo dosing. So this gets into psychedelics. We'll just jump right into there. So anyway, like my concept is, um, okay, so like in a journey, with my typical facilitators, we'd have like a heart opener. So something to kind of give you some ease. So this would be something like MDA, which is the natural version, the less kind of intense Adderall version of like of MDMA. It's MDA is more mild, and it comes from sassafras, and so you get that. Then you might have the psilocybin in ceremonial cacao, so like the mushrooms in chocolate, right? And so that's a great combination. And then like the next day, we would do wachuma, which is a cactus. It's also called San Pedro, and it has mescaline in it. And it helps like you kind of relax and bends time and be hyper present and helps your nervous system stay relaxed. So it's great for integration work and to have ease. Like let's say if you did the journey on Friday evening, then all day Saturday you can relax. And then on Sunday you might do like the integration circle and then go about your way. That's a lot better than doing a journey and then just going right back into your life, going into traffic, getting on a plane. Those kinds of things can be too abrupt to the nervous system. So anyway, so that's the idea. But the echo dosing, now you might have heard of doing like a microdose after a journey, maybe, it might help you like kind of stay in that zone. Well, this would be doing that exact strain. Say it's like, B plus, golden teacher, penis envy is the mushroom, that you have that exact strain, ideally prepared by that exact facilitator in that exact blend and ratio. So let's say it's the sassafras, the cacao, that psilocybin in a microdosed ratio. And then you're having macrodosed nutrients that I've built out in my stacks that I can actually give you a link for if you want. Like I have all these stacks on supplements around journeys, but macrodosed things that help with like neuroplasticity and helping your neurotransmitters bounce back. So that's what you have following your journey. You have microdosed journey in the exact forms and exact ratios, and you have these macrodosed nutrients. And then I give the microdosed version of those macronutrients that happen post journey during the journey or pre journey. So now this is like the whole echo dosing thing. So where your body is like aware on a macro and micro level, it like anchors back. These are called like psychosomatic anchors. Add to it, like during the journey, let's say if there was sage or agua de Florida or like some of these scents that are often used in journeys, that you use those post journey to put yourself into a space to process, to integrate in the following weeks, to stay neuroplastic. You listen to that journey playlist again, especially the song where you had the epiphany, right? And it's like those are all psychosomatic anchors. Psycho meaning brain, somatic meaning body, and anchor meaning like it's now made permanent. Your body knows that connection. And so you can access that later by using these tools and especially combining them.
Yeah, when I was in undergrad studying, I used rosemary essential oil and certain Spotify playlists to, I guess, create that
Yep.
response.
Psychosomatic anchors. Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
the anchor, exactly. So that way I would study with that. And then on the day of the exam, I'd go in and I'd reapply, reconjure up the exact same state. And it works. It certainly works. I hadn't heard it applied to like psychedelic use, so that's a really cool idea.
That's a great hack right there for people listening that are studying or yeah. So that's funny you say that because like there's actually for those of you that can see this or if you're listening, like there's actually a way that you can what's called chain anchors with NLP, right? Neurolinguistics programming that I've studied a lot, like where some people might do this thing where you like pinch like that webbing between your index finger and your thumb, right? every time you do that, that anchor grows in strength. Now, let's say you're about to go out on stage. Guess what you do? And a lot of speakers use this tool. There's this data that like you put your arms up above your head like you win, and it's like you're open, right? Like your whole body's open. Because what do we do when we're like resistant to like an idea or people? We close down our body, we cross our arms, we even like get our arms over our midsection, our core to protect our core. We scrunch up our face, like all these things that are showing that body language is showing we're resistant. So when we open up our body, like when people win, even blind people do this. The data shows that like when they win something, their arms are high and open, their whole body's open. So, that's something I do. I make myself laugh because again, these anchors, your body doesn't know the cause and effect. It's just wired. Yeah, those are just some quick hacks that like you can actually do before a presentation or before a speech or, before you go out on that big date or whatever, like to transform your mood. Certainly breath work is something I do like for sure is getting in your breath. And I like box breathing.
Yep.
I know that sounds super simple. Your people probably know what it is, but just, the box is it's kind of the four-sided box. There's the inhale, the hold, the exhale, the hold. So like a 4 to 8 second box is pretty good. So it's like a 4 second box would be breathing in through your nose.
And repeating.
And that's done. Make sure when you do these, a lot of people I find what they do wrong is that that's actually like 2 seconds. Like it's important to actually like spread your breath in. And this is hard to do, hard to get beyond the 4 seconds unless you train, but spread your breath in and spread your breath out for the entirety of that. That's really important. So it's like a controlled inhale, a controlled exhale.
I like what you mentioned previously about just focusing on the one person, because when we get in our own heads, we think, okay, what is this going to mean down the line in the future? Who's going to see this? What if it goes viral? And all of a sudden we're like very disconnected from what we're actually doing and how we're feeling and what we're actually going to experience. When you're able to focus on just one person or a couple people and have a conversation with them, be present with them, it makes it a lot easier, and a lot of those fears tend to subside. So tell me about your experience with supplements. I know that you've mentioned a couple in passing, and for those that don't know, you have like a pretty extensive history with supplements.
Yeah, I've been dubbed the world's greatest formulator. I didn't give myself that title, but I've been in the industry for almost 25 years, like doing formulations, patenting unique ingredients. I've done over 1,000 formulations. I've patented 25 unique ingredients that we can talk about here, and one of which was the one in Update, Paraxanthine, the metabolite of caffeine. But I did also T-cream and dynamine and some of these other ingredients. But yeah, I've like flavored like over 300 products. I've helped take 11 companies to sale in the supplement, food, and beverage space. Like I'm a chief clinical dietitian, and I worked clinically for over a decade. I'm an author. I wrote a book called The Energy Formula that's all on biohacking, and I go through all the supplement stacks in there, and there's like 70 full color diagrams and all that kind of stuff. So it's super practical. But I also have been very outspoken on mental health, on psychedelics, on my journey with depression and suicidal thoughts. So that's a big area for me as well.
Very multifaceted. And I think when people see supplements, they tend to think, okay, fairly simple product, a couple of ingredients, and that's it. That's all there is to it. But it's a much more complex world than that. And are there any particular problems or mistakes you see people making when they go the DIY approach that I often do with creating new blends to test on myself?
couple things could happen is if you're shotgunning too much stuff, you're kind of bypassing the scientific method, right? You don't know what's actually working and what isn't. There may be some things in there that are very productive. There may be some things that are counterproductive, and you don't really know. I certainly recommend isolated nutrients, seeing what it does, giving yourself a week to kind of journal on it, being in your body, understanding it, being fair to where you're not expecting it to be a miracle, because there is bioindividuality, most certainly. So doing that and looking at maybe one ingredient a week and saying whether you're going to use this or not use this. But then the other risk that happens, like when you're really far out on the edge, is you don't have the same quality control assurances, like, now or Thorn or, someone doesn't make this. It's like, you know, a smaller company, like, I'll just say that's like, I don't want to name names, but like definitely a smaller company. And you just don't know whether they have the same concerns and focus around quality control. A lot of times they just don't even know what to know. And they're not doing the third party testing for sure, like literally without a doubt, compared to like someone like Thorn or Now.
How do you go about deciding whether an ingredient, molecule that you come across is safe to use? Because there's a lot out there. Certain things look very promising, but there's just not as much research on them as there is others.
I'm looking at the science. I'm looking at um, the feasibility when it comes to, can I commercialize this and develop it, like realistically? Like, is the price feasible? Is the ingredient stable? What does it taste like? Can we like source it realistically from wherever it's coming from? Like, what are the raw materials that are needed to make it? All of those kinds of things, are factoring in. And then patentability is a big thing. Like, what are the existing patents? Like, what is the existing research? Are there gaps there, like where I can come in and create something new where we can protect it? All of those things play in. Absolutely, huge, huge factors.
Yeah, so I think a good place to transition to is for your average person who has no interest in creating their own supplement stacks and instead wants to just rely on individual products, hopefully formulated by someone like yourself who really knows what they're doing. What are the like red flags or green flags to look for when evaluating supplements? Because I know that I come across certain things, and I'm sure you have a much better list than I do.
Okay, so number one is ridiculous claims. If there's 500% more XXXX, like 500% more muscle mass, 880% faster, any of this kind of stuff, do not buy the supplement. Like, that's actually not compliant per the FDA. It's really manipulative. Like, you could take data, let's say that's like um, there's like a 0.1% increase in the control group, and then there's a 0.3% increase, in the experimental group with the supplement. Both aren't doing anything, but you can say like 200% more, like, like whatever, that kind of stuff. And so, like, I think it's very manipulative, and that's why the FDA doesn't like it either. So that's one thing to look out for. Proprietary blends, without a doubt, do not buy them. This is a very disreputable practice where you have like the muscle and strength blend with 17 ingredients, and it's like 1,000 milligrams, and you're like, oh, I like all of those things. I want all these nutrients. They all sound good. Like, I'm good if they're all listed. No, you're not. I mean, one, they're not standardized to anything quite often. Like, it could just be ginseng leaf and not ginseng root, and not ginseng root standardized for ginsenoside A, or whatever it is. But two, the doses aren't right. So, like, yeah, it's cool that it has creatine, but creatine is like, let's say, $8 a kilo, and 999 milligrams of that 1,000 milligram blend could be creatine, And the other 16 ingredients could be 1 milligram. What are you doing? Like, it's like, because these are listed in order of descending mass. So literally the first thing could be, that's the thing. If the first thing is super cheap, then that's what they're doing. So just don't trust companies that are doing proprietary blends. You want full transparency labeling. You want the ingredient, its genus and species. If it's an herb, the plant part. You want the standardization. You want the dose. You want all of that listed out clearly. Typically, this is a hard rule to make, but like, let's say it's not more than like 6 ingredients. And all those ingredients are complementary and have different mechanisms of action so that they complement each other to work well in synergy. Certainly in a multivitamin, you're going to have more ingredients, and that makes sense. But like some of these ones that are just, it's the kitchen sink formula, like Be Weary. Quality brands that have been around a long time that have established quality control programs, again, like, these kind of elite healthcare practitioner products like Designs for Health, Thorne, Zymogen, those kinds of brands, cool. Those are great brands. But some of these Amazon brands that you've never heard of, I mean, one, they haven't been around long enough. They don't know what they know. I know some of these companies that are 1, 2, 3 people. I have run companies that are doing similar size business of 50 million plus that are over 100 people. I mean, think about that. Like, they're just not seeing things. They don't have the expertise and knowledge to really scale that and have that in such a way that there is the appropriate quality control taking place. So that is a big concern for me. And not all of them are doing it disreputably, like intentionally. They just, again, don't know what they don't know. So this is where I like to pay for that quality control so that I'm getting the ingredients that I want and also not getting the ingredients I do not want. Heavy metals, bacteria, banned substances, like whatever was on that production line prior could end up tainting whatever's on that line in your product. And then sometimes companies spike ingredients, like, they're just not listing everything. So, or they're just sourcing it from a cheap source where they're spiking the ingredient but not telling the company, and then the company isn't doing third party testing. They're taking the raw material suppliers labs as gospel, which is not accurate. Like, you need to like third party test, you need to validate those results. But lastly, with Amazon, make sure that you are not getting like a third party seller of their products. Like, so make sure it's not Thorn or Now from Joe's Crab Shack, right? Like we want to make sure like that Thorn product is sold by Thorn.
I noticed that myself. One time, I will not name any names, but I was looking at a product on Amazon and then the actual company's website to choose where to buy it from, find the best price. And I realized the labels were very similar, but not quite identical. So I called the company up and they were like, "Oh no, we don't sell anything on Amazon." I'm like, "Well, there's a listing right here and it has like your label on it and everything." And it turns out it was like a counterfeit product. And judging by all the news stories, a lot of the retailers and sometimes specifically Amazon have lots of big problems with supplements. And recently, NMN, there was a huge shutdown of like 20 or 30 NMN vendors because they were all counterfeit, like shell companies, basically.
Honestly, like the best case scenario is where it has nothing and no active. What's scary is when they have way too much of something that's supposed to be a tiny amount, like vitamin D. I mean, that can actually get toxic and dangerous. So it's like, that this is where like the quality control is huge, so important. So I like to pay a little bit more and make sure I'm getting what I want to get and not getting what I don't want to get.
A lot of supplements suffer from very low bioavailability, poor absorption. Do you like any of the like supplement delivery technologies to enhance that, whether it's liposomal or phytosomes or something along those lines?
Yeah, so liposomal, absolutely. Phytosome is really another way of saying that, but like it's a herbal nutrient that's being delivered. Um, where I don't necessarily like it is things that affect the cytochrome P450 pathway. So like these grapefruit extracts or black pepper extracts and things like that. That's actually there as a protective barrier, essentially, like to protect you from toxins, to protect too much stuff from coming through. Um, and one, with some nutrients, it does enhance the bioavailability, and some it actually lowers it. They don't usually talk about this. And then secondarily, you may be letting things through, heavy metals, whatever, that like shouldn't be getting through, or toxic compounds that like, just should not be getting through that are now getting through. Um, so I'd be very careful in using those. And by the way, like, that way, if you're taking multiple supplements at once, and especially if you are taking drugs, this is very, very dangerous now. Like, let's say you're taking a blood pressure drug or a blood sugar drug or a sleep medication or an anti anxiety medication or whatever you're taking, and you're taking the supplement that has estrogen or like Sabinsa, pipe, the bioperine or, whatever it is, naringin, and, these different like grapefruit compounds. And these things are not necessarily safe for you to just take like shotgun and be letting a lot of things through, and potentially taking dangerous levels of something like, so that blood pressure medication could end up being like 3x.
For me, that's another one of those red flags. If I see that on the label, I just try to avoid it because I view a lot of those ingredients as like Trojan horses that evade your body's like natural defenses that protect you and also inhibit your ability to absorb certain amounts of certain nutrients. But it's also protecting you against the things that you're unknown of, like what toxins you're exposed to that your body naturally detoxifies and prevents from absorbing. But all of a sudden, because you're giving it this crutch, this you're introducing, say, black pepper extract that can have a lot more harm on your body. And there's interactions with things that you don't even realize, such as drugs or other things that like you apply to your skin, for example, and might have all kinds of effects you wouldn't have imagined.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things that, yeah, you're saying eventually can get introduced into your system that you're not even aware of. So that's a great point.
hmm I know you're a fan of mitochondria, and we've talked a little bit about nootropics, I think mostly in the last podcast. What is your current thoughts around the intersection of the two?
I've talked about mito as kind of the next keto, if you will. Like, I think it's going to be very hot. Your mitochondrial health is predictive of nearly all disease. Mitochondrial health is certainly predictive of cellular energy, of ATP, which is the energy currency for the body. So mitochondria is critical also, like with biological versus chronological aging. Like how well we're aging is a result of mitochondrial biogenesis and how healthy the, like basically the number and the health of the mitochondria. So where do we see the most mitochondria? Wherever that cell is energy intensive, that tissue is energy intensive. So we see, you might think from high school biology that there's one mitochondria in each cell, like that's how the drawing looks. In a heart cell, a cardiomyocyte, there's 5,000. Brown adipose tissue, which you only have, I don't know, like 5 to 7 ounces of on your body, which is this highly thermogenic tissue, that could be like kind of the holy grail of thermogenesis and fat loss, if you will, is brown adipose tissue, which you can activate with like spices like grains of paradise, cayenne, capsaicin, ginger, but also cold plunges and cold exposure and all that. So really cool stuff. But that's actually brown because it's mitochondrial dense. The brown adipose tissue has so many mitochondria, which have the iron present, and so that is something to be aware of. And where else would be energy intensive? The heart, like I said, this brown adipose tissue, and the brain. The brain is going through a ton of calories. The brain is using a ton of energy. So, absolutely, mitochondrial health and nootropics, converge or intersect, like you're saying. And a nootropic stack would certainly be well reinforced by a mitochondrial stack.
What are the ingredients that you like as nootropics, whether they're mitochondrial enhancers or not?
So, first and foremost, in any nootropic stack is going to be your cholinergic, like because you one have the phospholipids in the brain that choline's critical for, but two, acetylcholine. Whenever you're doing like a lot of processing, whenever you're doing deep thinking, you're running through a lot of acetylcholine, that neurotransmitter, of which you need choline, acetylcholine, right, to make it. And phospholipids of the brain, that kind of fatty makeup of the brain, is like phospholipids. There's phosphatidylserine, there's phosphatidylcholine, all of that make up the brain. So choline's critical for both. So those are kind of at the foundation. And there'd be two forms that are optimized and highly bioavailable. And that would be CDP choline or alpha GPC. I prefer alpha GPC slightly over the former. So that would be a place where I would start. And then I'd start adding in some of these other, nootropics. You can play with the race tams. New pept is like a really potent one that I've always liked, that's at a pretty low dose. That's NOOPEPT. But I'd say like one of my other favorites that I've been exploring is the Cooleracetam. That's kind of a newer one that's made its way out to the market. And just so you know, these are kind of gray market ingredients. You have to kind of go to some of these like nootropics depot type websites to find these things. As far as like what's natural and kind of more compliant, these adaptogens are excellent. I love like ashwagandha, rhodiola, lion's mane, these kinds of things. Like they have the capacity to make your brain more resilient and make your body more resilient, to make you more anti-fragile, essentially, because they're bimodal and they help with that stress adaptation. By bimodal, I mean like it actually helps with your sleep and relaxation as well as your stimulation and focus. And so this is where we see something that's optimizing us do both. Whereas like, Lunesta and Ambien like slam you over the head to go to sleep, and then, caffeine and nicotine are like slamming you with stimulants, and those things are not bimodal. They're not enhancing your body's function, right? There's a really cool one. Really cool. I'll drop on your crew here. 7-8 dihydroxyflavone. And I'm really excited about that one. That one enhances BDNF better than injected BDNF protein because it does pass the blood-brain barrier. And what really could be interesting is there's a metabolite called 4-DMA 7-8 dihydroxyflavone as well. I know that's a lot, but I'm taking both of those together because I'm not sure like which one's the active, but a lot of times in chemistry and biochemistry, you want to like essentially exploit a pathway. So like if you take both, you're catalyzing like the direction that this is moving. So I take both. I take both 7-8 dihydroxyflavone and the 4-DMA 7-8 dihydroxyflavone. You can get these on Nootropics Depot, but they are potent ingredients for neuroplasticity, which is the youth, the resilience of the brain, protecting the neurons and making new neurons. Making new neurons is very hard. So this is keeping your brain young and resilient so that you have more what's called fluid intelligence, where you can take on new tasks easier. Think of like learning a new language, learning new music, taking that new way to work, getting in that stressful situation. You're relaxed, you're able to deal with it. Like young people have more neuroplasticity. As we age, we lose neuroplasticity. We tend to, but certainly taking new languages, learning new music, getting exposed to new cultures, putting yourself in more difficult situations, training in new sports, putting your belt on the opposite way, using the opposite hand when brushing your teeth, all this kind of stuff helps you stay more neuroplastic. But as we age, we tend to get more crystallized intelligence. And that's where, essentially it's ideal that that box is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Like we know that way to work so well that we can do it in our sleep. We can do it faster than that young person. So there's these two types of intelligence that are both very important. And it tends to be older people are smarter in the crystallized way, and younger people are smarter in the fluid way. But there's ways to obviously get better at both. And it's important for the youth, for the longevity of the brain to keep BDNF high. There's also two other proteins that are important that we've discovered related to brain health, and that's NGF, which is nerve growth factor, and mTOR, which we tend to think of for muscle mass, but it's important for the hypertrophy of a number of tissues, including the brain. So that's something to explore. What we see is that most polyphenols are associated with BDNF. We've seen the chlorogenic acid with green coffee berry, but almost all the polyphenols I'm believing are related to BDNF and neuroplasticity. So, tend to think of resveratrol, pterostilbene, quercetin, EGCG, catechins, chlorogenic acid, apigenin, fisetin. All of those things are going to be, some people say fisetin, but all of those things are going to be, polyphenols that I believe are enhancing BDNF, because we also see with the polyphenols, they're also lowering blood sugar, lowering inflammation. They're associated with sirtuin gene activity. They're reducing the shortening of telomeres. They're keeping you more resilient. And so we're also seeing that in particular, apigenin and fisetin may be the two best polyphenols when it comes to NAD production. So they're actually inhibiting the enzyme NADase that's breaking down NAD, which we get the double whammy of, we are making less NAD as we age, just in general, plus we're making less and breaking it down faster because of alcohol, because of stress, because of diet, because of EMFs, because there's like a ton of reasons that we just don't make as much NAD, and then we're breaking it down faster. So NAD, we're making less NAD, and we're higher in NADase, also called CD38, this enzyme that's breaking down NAD. So it's the double whammy where we have a whole lot less NAD. What's cool is all of these things, especially apigenin and fisetin, are inhibiting the breakdown of NAD, so inhibiting the NADase and CD38. So that's very cool. What do I like to increase production of NAD? I do like NMN. It is expensive. It's getting harder to find. You probably read that it's potentially going off the market. There's a lot of controversy there. And like you pointed out, a lot of it is not legit. So, that's a little bit of a roll of the dice there. So NMN can be solid, but I like nicotinic acid true niacin the most. So the full flush niacin, so not the no flush niacin like the niacinamide or the inositol hexanicotinate, but the nicotinic acid, real niacin that's full flush. There's a study with 500 milligrams twice a day where they saw 8 times increase in NAD levels in the muscle. So pretty dramatic. Now, 500 milligrams is going to be intense. Like you would have like that sunburn, that it's called paresthesia, like where you get that itchy, tingling, burning feeling. So I would suggest that someone start with 100 milligrams. You're already going to feel that if you've never taken niacin, and take some NMN with it. and kind of use that as a stack, and then work your way up over time. Like you can, get used to it more over time and adapt to it.
Is there an issue with depleting methyl groups or mast cell activation from high consumption of niacin?
Autoimmune wise, potentially. It's harder to say, like in terms of, I think if you're healthy, no, I don't see that. But autoimmune wise, that is potentially a thing. And, it's kind of like taking antioxidants, like, if you have cancer, like, you're protecting these cancer compounds or cells. So that can be problematic too. Like, I think you need to be mindful of like where your body's at and what you're providing. And again, you don't want to be shotgunning all these things as a result. But I've only seen that in the case of like where you're autoimmune activated already. So some other things to add: ergothioneine, which is an ingredient I've helped bring to market that could be a new vitamin. It protects the mitochondria. It's an antioxidant specifically for the mitochondria, not just the cell, but the mitochondria. And there's a unique transporter system for it in the body, and there's a unique storage system for it in the body. And we have shown that there's a deficiency of it. So this literally could be a new vitamin any day now. So it's fascinating. And there's almost no ingredients out there that have like a unique storage system and transporter system, like that tells you how important it is to your body. So that's pretty incredible right there alone. But, we're showing that there's cognitive decline without it, and there's cognitive enhancement with it. So, certainly that ingredient, spermidine, but in higher doses, like 1 milligram in a couple studies that have been done does nothing, even 1.5. Like we're talking about more like 3 to 5 milligrams a day. We're seeing it kind of move the needle, and it has been shown to, with those that are aging and mild cognitive impairment, that it's been shown to prevent that. So, that's something to look at potentially as well, especially if you have things like traumatic brain injury. Now, along those lines, if you have PTSD, traumatic brain injury, creatine is a protector of the brain. A great methylator, has been shown to reverse traumatic brain injury, has been shown to improve reaction times, improve uh, like I guess reduce cognitive impairment, reduce mental errors, those kinds of things, and high DHA fish oil as well. Has been shown to reverse traumatic brain injury and help with cognitive processing. I like methylcobalamin is the methylated coenzymated form of B12, which I think some people like. I don't feel B12. I think they're taking like cyanocobalamin. They're taking lower doses. Methylcobalamin can make a big difference if you're deficient in it, certainly, but will protect the neuronal sheath, help with cognitive processing as well. So, but methylation in general, which is why I like these methylating compounds like creatine, because you're getting the added benefits, but also you could take like trimethylglycine, which is betaine. You could take MSM, which is great. Like the sulfur group is like great for joint health and bone health as well. So that's something to look at. Are those compounds? I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would add to this mitochondrial stack. I mean, CoQ10 and PQQ for sure. And PQQ I think is often too low dose because it is expensive. I'm looking at like 20 plus milligrams a day. Um, and CoQ10, especially if you're aging, like if you're over 50, you need the ubiquinol, the reduced form versus ubiquinone. So that's something to look at. And then there is a compelling form called MitoQ that may be the best one out there. There's a lot of claims about it. It's hard for me to say exactly. A lot of the research has been done by them, so I can't say for sure, but the MitoQ form may be the best form out there.
I have actually a bunch of 7,8 hydroxyflavone laying around. I haven't got around to playing with it. Is it dihydroxyflavone?
Yeah.
DHF?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dihydroxy.
but I'm thinking if I start doing neurofeedback training or anything like really mentally intensive like that, or even if I go traveling and I'm in a new environment with lots of change around me, those could be great stacks or that plus polyphenols. And polyphenols are in a lot of fruits and vegetables and foods. A lot of the supplements you just listed are like out of foods. So I can combine these and I can adapt to the changing environments faster.
Exactly. And adaptogens would be great to throw in that mix too. Yeah, exactly. So that's a great point. Yep.
One thing I was just wondering about is if these same compounds that improve and increase neuroplasticity, if that is being investigated for use in the treatment of traumas, big T traumas and little T traumas, like the big like PTSD types things, and then also for like more like lower key relational things that everyone has from living life and are much more minute, but explain why you snap in the way you snap. And I'm saying you as in oneself, and like the tone and all these different things that are less tangible than like a discrete event that might have happened.
That's great that you brought that up because I wanted to really add like a wrinkle, some nuance here, like a watch out, if you will, is especially like, because I recommend this related to like my psychedelic stacks, like that, those compounds, the 7,8 dihydroxyflavone, lion's mane, 4-DMA, 7,8 dihydroxyflavone, all those kinds of things. The problem is if you're still in the trauma, you don't want to be highly neuroplastic. Like, there's a reason that when you're traumatized, that neuroplasticity goes down. There's a reason that all the neurotransmitters are depressed. All of them go down, not just serotonin. That theory is super flawed and has been disproven. Like it's all of them: endorphins, GABA, norepinephrine, epinephrine, histamine, histidine, and dopamine. Like all that serotonin, obviously, like is all going down, right? So that you're feeling less. You're not kind of ironing all this stuff in. We're highly, highly, highly neuroplastic in a psychedelic state. And where the default mode network is turned off. Like, so ego is essentially suppressed. So we're not filtering truth and we're able to make radical change quickly.
Mm.
But this is bad. Like if you're in a traumatic environment, this is why I don't like psychedelics. Like if you're at a rave, at some crazy party, like where things can just go wrong, you can get more traumatized.
Mm.
And so if you're still in the trauma, it's not ideal to be taking these. Where it does make sense if you've removed yourself from that trauma, where you are now in a safe environment, where you have worked through that, where you know, like, here's where I'm the best place for me to be, where I feel safe and supported and secure, then yes, like absolutely. Now is the time to bring the brain back online, to have, I like to replete serotonin with things like 5-HTP and Zembrin or Kanna extract, saffron, D3. Like those are all great for serotonin. For dopamine, there's like L-Dopa. For acetylcholine, we talked about the cholinergics. We talked like alpha GPC. There's the huperzine A, which is an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor that's going to all help replete these neurotransmitters. I don't like staying on these things long term. No, I like taking them short term after the depletion. So after you've had like a really heavy day, like presenting or being on stage or traveling, or after you've had this big experience in psychedelics, it does make sense. So I'll just say all of that is important to bring neurotransmitters back online, to get your brain in a more neuroplastic state. But again, feeling more, processing more, being more impressionable, being more empathic, like a young person is. Think about like how suicidal, like, and depressed, and like potently young people feel things, right?
Mhm.
So like it doesn't make sense to like some people, like the older you get, like the less neuroplastic you are, and you're like, well, that's weird, like why are they like so sensitive? Like it is good to be neuroplastic. Like I'm making that point, but be careful if you're still in a traumatic environment. So that's my watch out there.
That's a really important point, and I actually had a similar realization not too long ago. I had picked up a bunch of a peptide called dihexa, and I was excited, looking
Mhm.
forward to using it. And it's also supposedly very, very potent in terms of neuroplasticity
Yep.
enhancement. And then I was also going through some tough times in my life at that point too. So I was like, okay, perhaps I should wait on this and wait until I'm not like very stressed and use it then. So I'm actually wiring the right pathways stronger.
Exactly. It's just like chaining, right? Like we were talking about the anchors, right?
Hmm.
So like I was telling you to chain those anchors by like, pressing this area between your thumb and forefinger each time you're happy, you're joyous, like you're in a great mood, you're in love, like whatever these things are. You can also chain negative things. And you're already doing that. Like, every time you have a bad experience, you're listening to this song or, whatever it is, like you can do these things. Like, be careful with like what you're anchoring and where you're anchoring
We're kind of related to this. Are there any empathogens, substances that increase empathy, preferably legal, that I and my listeners can look into?
There's a couple things. The cannabinoids are really fascinating. The endocannabinoid system is so underappreciated. It's insane. Like I know you've heard like people are like, "Oh, I know CBD and THC and whatever." Cool. And the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, is known as the master regulator system in the body. It's controlling pain, inflammation, mood, immunity, and there's deficiencies of these different cannabinoids in your body. And I don't know any doctors of the endocannabinoid system, and yet it's such a critical system. I know doctors of the musculoskeletal system, of the cardiovascular system, of the nervous system. I don't know any doctors of the endocannabinoid system. So we're completely ignorant of this very massive area, and it's kind of sad, but they can have a huge impact on mood and empathy. The dose and which ones, it's hard for me to say because there's no way for us to test for that. But I would say experiment with CBG, CBN, CBC, CBD, and see what works for you. I've worked on Anadomide, which is a bliss chemical, and PEA is another one of those chemicals that's in that pathway. So those are some empathogens that you could look at. Is PEA, OEA is another one to look at. Those all could be very interesting. Certainly, I think in sparing usage, like I'm saying, Kanna is a really interesting compound because it is a natural SSRI, like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It's going to have like excess serotonin like hanging around. I do not like this idea long term at all. Like I will say that. Like I don't like SSRIs long term. I think it's actually very counterproductive. But in short term, that can be very compelling to give you that mood boost, that lift. Paraxanthine is going to be another one. Now, we've studied this on a preclinical level, and we're seeing it does increase BDNF. It does increase nitric oxide to the brain. It does increase serotonin and dopamine. So you are getting that feel good kind of swagger from it. And it does increase actually glutathione and catalase as well. So it's really cool.
Maybe less traditional, but things like, are you a fan of things like kava or even oxytocin?
Kava definitely feeling better, kind of smoothing you out. Some things if you're someone who's overstimulated, that's really important too. Like I am empathic, but I'm also a highly sensitive person. So like crowded environments and too much stimuli can like really throw me off. So like taking my nervous system down a bit, like using things like theanine can be really helpful. magnesium. One of my favorites is actually Hanekiol from magnolia bark. And there's even dihydrohanekiol beta, which is its metabolite.
DHHB, is it?
Yep, yep. That's a really cool one. And there's even a new compound coming from magnolia called tetrahydromagnolol. I know this is like people are like, "Oh my god!" But these are really great compounds that are kind of like natural anxiolytics, meaning they reduce anxiety. So that can help you kind of like smooth things out, relax into yourself. Kratom is a really interesting one. It does have low amounts of opiates. So this is where like getting off Oxycontin or heroin or things like that can be great using kratom. And also, there is concern of high dosing kratom where it's replacing those things and it can be very highly addictive and even kill you. That is the concern with kratom, and why its legality is questioned. It can be a great tool. It can be a great relaxant, but there is some concern there. By the way, like chocolate does contain PEA, does contain anandamide, a number of these bliss chemicals, but you have to have the fatty chocolate in its like ceremonial dark chocolate form. All right. But make sure it has the cacao butter in it too, like the fattiness to it. You don't want a defatted cacao. You don't want a milk chocolate. You want like this full fat, like as dark as it can be, as low processed as it can be form of chocolate. And, melted, it's delicious. You can add like cinnamon to it or, whatever you want to do. And that can be an amazing way. Like that's why the ceremonial cacao like has like is a heart opener itself in like the journey situations where people do cacao ceremonies. It's very different from eating chocolate.
That's a cool one. I have to explore that more, especially because it's so popular here in Austin. And other heart openers, are you a fan of intranasal oxytocin?
I have it. Yes, I love it. And I also, this is actually a combination of oxytocin and ketamine. So
Oh, wow. Right there.
I'm a big fan of the intranasal form like that. Like you will never need to have a drink again if you, there's a mild dissociative quality similar to having like a drink or two, but it's much cleaner without the calories, without the impact on the circadian rhythm from ketamine. And it's not like fully dosing ketamine where you're having a journey or high dosing it where it's an anesthesia clinically. A little amount of dissociation is just like having a couple of drinks because like for me especially because I'm a highly sensitive person because like I have probably a little bit on the spectrum or I'm like pulling in so much data like I'm empathic, right? Like I'm hearing all the conversations, hearing the music, seeing all the lights. I'm like kind of overwhelmed. I'm like now hyper vigilant. It's all a lot. I'm like I need to leave this place. If I can just dampen that a little bit, I can be present. So it allows me, like, yes, you're dissociating a little bit, but it allows me to be more present as a result. It seems kind of counterintuitive or ironic, but when you're in kind of that like wrong vibration, like, it can actually put you in kind of that right spot where all you can do is be present. Like you can't be thinking 10 thoughts at once, right? So it's very relaxing in that sense. And then oxytocin feels like that, that hug that you're getting and it's amazing when you actually hug on oxytocin and ketamine. It's like you're just like there for like hugs all the time. Like it's great. So yeah, big fan.
As you were speaking, I was thinking of the slight dissociative effect of the ketamine as like if you're in a loud room with a bunch of conversations, it's like bringing down all the volumes except for the one conversation so you can really be there and present and focus on the one as opposed to like trying to focus on all of them at once and being able to pay attention to none of them as a result.
Yeah, and people make fun of alcohol all the time and say it's low vibration and it does as calories and can mess up your sleep quality and certainly I don't recommend getting drunk and all these things, but like used on occasion, if that's the tool you have. For me, it helps me stay in these environments and like be present. So, it's different than just like, getting wasted and whatever. So like for me, I do use it on occasion, especially if I don't have like something like this ketamine, and I want to stay in the environment and be present and listen to these people. And I don't want to be kind of like freaking out the whole time. So yeah.
Well, Shawn, before we start to wind this one down, if people are interested in connecting with you, following your work, grabbing your book, how do they go about that?
Okay, so energyformula.com for the book. I have 2 free chapters there in both the audio and the written format in the ebook. I have an ebook, the Audible, soft cover, hardcover, has 70 full color diagrams, infographics. I have surveys in there. I have Formulator's Corner with all the supplement stacks, resource hacks that have all the devices and apps and things that you can use. I get $0 out of any affiliate, anything in there. It is just honest advice. So I think it's a great book. I'm at Shawn Wells, ShawnWells on the platforms. And make sure you see the blue check and look for that name, because there's a ton of fake accounts that drives me insane. Yeah, follow me there. I have a ton of great content, a lot of infographics, videos, educating on all these different stacks and things. I do talk about mental health a fair bit and even psychedelics. So I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those different things. And yeah.
Yeah. And I read your book when it first came out. Unfortunately, I was part of the Kindle crew, so I didn't get to see the full colored pictures in their glory. But it was a good read. And I also love your lists of the top 10 supplements for X goal that you post on Instagram all the time. So keep up the good work there. And before I let you go, which 3 teachers have had the biggest impact on your life and work?
I mean, first and foremost is going to be myself, like really listen. I've spent most of my life, because of what I was saying, because I had a difficult childhood and a lot of reasons I could have stayed in victimization, and I spent a lot of my life dissociated, and then biohacking and to the most extreme level, and then not even realizing that I'm like dying a number of times, like just demolishing myself until like all the red lights are flashing. And because I wasn't in my body, literally, I was just dissociated most of my life, because I am empathic, because I was feeling a lot, and it was scary. That I got good at staying dissociated. And then I took pride in how dissociated I was, how many hours I could work, how pain never bothered me. If you're saying all these things, you're dissociated. And that's not healthy for relationships with other people and certainly yourself. And so getting back in my body, doing a lot of the work in the psychedelic environment, and also just, in deep inner work and breath work and gratitude and meditation, like I feel like listening to myself is one of the most critical teachers there are, like, is just listening to yourself. So I think you yourself is a critical teacher you need to get aligned with. I'd say after that, Don Miguel Ruiz, like when I read the 4 Agreements, it absolutely shook up my life and made so much sense. I love the 4 Agreements.
That first one especially, I can see that you are embodying that, the integration of both the masculine and the feminine, sitting with that and doing the necessary inner work. And you managed to tie the end just now back to the beginning with the presentations and just changing one person's life and how that can cause a ripple effect of good on the world.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Nick.
Well, Shawn, this round 2 has been a pleasure so far. Thanks for joining me on the Mind Body Peak Performance podcast. Until next time, I'm here, Nick Urban, with Shawn Wells, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.